I'm going to show you how to replace a ceiling fan wall switch in a minute. The first thing, and the very first thing you always have to do, is turn the power off. So you got to locate that in your panel. And I've already located it. And so I know that's the right one. Okay? Let's do it. I've previously made the determination that this ceiling fan switch is bad. So I've got to replace that. So the first thing we got to do, obviously, is we got to take this cover plate off. Okay? So undo those screws and gently pull that cover plate off, making sure you don't damage the wall. So be real careful along the edge. If it's stuck, you may have to take your sheetrock knife and kind of gently score it along there. A trick for you is do your blade upside down maybe, and try that too. When you get to the corner, don't try to see if you can just stop perfect, because sometimes you can go too far. So you want to start from the outside edge and work this way, the outside edge, and work down. When you get down to the bottom, do the bottom up. You know, wherever this is stuck, you just want to be really careful when you take those off. Let's not be damaging the wall now. That wasn't part of the project now, was it? Let's get that removed. On your switch here, it's going to be attached with 2 screws. Okay, just undo those screws now, and we're going to pull this out away from the wall. Okay, pull that out. Very simple to do. This is just going to pull out like this. You just want to be careful with it, because the wires, like especially the ground wire, might be in there tight. And we've got to look at that a little bit more closely to see if we can pull this out all the way without taking this other light switch off, because we may have to take that off to pull the wires out where the wire nuts are connected and all that. Okay, so I got to get in there and take a closer look. First thing I'm going to do is just look for any little wire nuts. And I see a couple little wire nuts in there, and I know that those are going to be connected to these black wires. This is stranded wire, and so the wire is very thin and small. So I know that's connected to some smaller wire nuts in here. If you got a question, just kind of play around with it. Shine your flashlight up in there or whatever you got to do. Okay, so that one I see is connected here. Oh, wow. This came right out of there underneath this orange wire nut. Wow. Now I know that wasn't the problem from before. I know this is bad. Let's just make believe I'm pulling this out for the very first time. Okay, you get your wire. You don't even have to take that off yet. We can fish in here for the other wire nut. And there it is. So you got 2 black wires coming from different parts of this ceiling fan switch. Okay? One black wire is going to go to one wire in the wall switch location box, and another one here. Okay, now there's a ground wire back there. What do we got to do with that? Look and see what we got up in there. Wow. And sometimes you just have to kind of take a look at things and see what you're going to do. There's a couple different ways we can do this. Now see this big huge wire nut right here. It's got some ground wires underneath it, and then it's got this green ground wire that connects to that. Now I could take that all apart and take this off, or I could cut this off right here and leave a long bit here, and then on the new ceiling fan switch, that comes with another green wire like this, and I can attach it to there. I could do it that way with a small wire nut, push that in. It looks like there's enough room back there. Or I can pull this light switch out, pull it out so I have enough room to get to this big wire nut, pull all that apart, and it's got electrical tape around it and all that kind of good stuff. And I think, I'm not sure yet, I think it's got a lot of ground wires in there because we've got this light switch here and we've also got this here. And there's a ground wire that goes over to here. So there's like 4 wires attached with this. I think I'm going to leave that. I think I'm going to leave that and keep that pushed up in there. Now if I wanted to, I could have taken that all apart, connect the ground wire. Now your ground wires might be hooked up a different way. The main thing is when you see the ground wire, you just got to make sure it's connected to the ground. Somewhere in your box you'll see some wires, some copper wires. Okay? So far this is what you're going to have coming out of the wall. Before you take these wire nuts off willy-nilly without thinking what you're doing, look on the back side of your existing ceiling fan switch. You should see a place where it says "to hot" and one that says "to fan." "To fan" means this black wire is going up to the ceiling fan. So if I control that and I look at that, I know this particular wire should be going up to the ceiling fan. This black wire should be going up to the ceiling fan, not this one. Okay, and I can look at that, and it's even got this one even has it marked on a little piece of yellow sheathing that the last electrician did as a favor, which was nice. Now if you didn't see that, you could look at that and see if this wire right here connected to the fan connection here where it says "to fan." You look at this hot wire here and look up there in the box and it's going up. Chances are that's the one going to the ceiling fan. You look at this other wire here and it says "to hot," T-O-H-O-T. That means this wire here is going to all the hot wires coming into the box and then out right here. This is connected up to some other hot black wires because one of them feeds this existing ceiling light switch right here, okay? So I know this black wire that comes out is connected to 2 or 3 other black wires in there, and this is just a stub wire coming out out of some other wires here. This one has nothing to it. It just goes up out of the box. So I know that goes to the ceiling fan. Okay, so I just want to look at that because, you know, just in case you get things mixed up and you start taking this off and you're not paying attention to it, you don't have to be afraid, you know, that you're doing anything wrong. We can get it figured out. Even if you didn't know which wires, and you pulled this off like that and you thought, uh-oh, does this one go up here? Or does this one go here? Or does that go down here? Or does that go down there? And does it even make a difference? And yes, by golly, by Joe, that is, it does make a difference. Because on the back side of here, you've got to hook up the new one right, okay? Now this one here is bad, and we're going to throw it away because this ground wire is sticking out like that. I decided I was going to cut that off, remember? I'm just going to cut that off. Is there a right or wrong way to make the ground wire connection? Not really. Other than making sure that everything in the box is still grounded. So I'm going to cut that off. This is bad. This is a bad switch anyway, so bye-bye. It's no good anymore. And maybe this wire here, this ground wire here is long enough. Now see, I can pull this wire nut out a little bit. It's not very long, is it? But I think I've got just enough room to put a wire nut on there with the other one. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Okay, so I'm just going to push that out of the way. I got to strip this back because I got to get a wire nut on there. If you don't have some wire strippers, you need to get some. These come in handy. You've got to have these to do any electrical project. And they don't cost very much at the store. Okay. And that's probably not long enough. Probably make that a little bit longer. I want to use the right size cutter on there, because if you go too small, what you could do is take off a little bit of the strand, because this wire is stranded wire. Last thing you want to do is just rip it off, and then you take a little bit of this strand off. Now it's not as powerful. We want to have all those strands together. So after I do that, I just want to twist them all together, you know, just so it's like one strand coming out. Okay? Here's the new ceiling fan switch I'm going to put in there. And before I do anything, see, it came with a cover plate, and they kind of did something snazzy here. They've got it hooked on there so you don't even see the screws. This is if you were going to put it in a brand new box, or if it was just a single gang box, which means a one place box. Well, here this is called a two gang or a double gang. Actually, we call it a two gang box because there's a light switch and the ceiling fan switch in there. So I'm not going to use this cover plate. So I went through a lot of effort here to make this so that you didn't see the screw, the surface mounted screws. In this box here, you snap this all together and voila, you don't see any screws or anything. Went through a lot of headache for that, so we got to pull that off of there, because we're not going to use this backing plate. Obviously this is for a single gang box. We couldn't put that in there because we're putting on our existing cover, remember? And so it's just like that. Incidentally, if you get a dimmer, you get a dimmer switch at the store, you've got to look at your existing ones. Okay, so here's the existing one that we had in there, and it's rectangular. That's because you've got the cover plate on here. We're going to try to reutilize that existing cover plate in there for that and the light switch that was rectangular. Now, sometimes at the store, you get a different type of dimmer, maybe a little cheaper brand. Maybe it's just got a round knob on it or something that you push and then you turn it. Well, it's going to have a small little notch for it, but that means you'd have to get a different cover plate. You'd have to get a standard one, you know, just a small little rectangular notch with the flip switch there. You would put that, you would use that, and you put the round knob over that. If you get the different type of dimmer, you'd have to get a different cover plate, one with the rectangle on this side, one with the small little one on this other side. So be careful of that when you're at the store deciding which kind of dimmer you're going to get, okay? So here's our dimmer switch that we've decided to use. We look on the back side, and now I don't know why I call it a dimmer switch. It's the ceiling fan switch, and I guess I call it a dimmer because you got high, medium, and low, okay? But incidentally, if you have a dimmer switch, light switch, I guess it would slightly be different because you would hook that up differently. We're hooking up a ceiling fan switch, and it's just for the ceiling fan, okay? And all ceiling fan switches, if it's just hooking up the ceiling fan, it's going to be the same. You got two black wires coming out of it, you got your ground wire, and that was just like our last one, huh? You look at here, you've got to make a determination of which black wire is going to go to where. But before we do that, before we even figure that out, we know we got the ground wire. And it's even marked on there, G for ground. And we know that's going to go to the ground. So, and it already kind of cuts off the wire and strips it for you and leaves the tip on, and you just got to kind of pull it off. And now I'm going to take that and I'm going to twist that together, this end, because this is stranded wire. I like to do that so it's just one piece. Makes it easier. And see how long that is? That's going to be plenty long to go back up into the box. And I'm going to hook this green wire up to this green wire. And see, I've got enough room to do that right here, okay? So with most switches that you get, they also, look at them, they should have a plastic bag in there. This one here has got a little plastic bag, and there's some little orange wire nuts, and there's some screws on there to attach this on there and all that. Well, I'm glad they did that because I had to use one of their little orange wire nuts. And that's what I'm going to use to connect these two ground wires together. Before hooking up these two ground wires, I could just set these two like this and screw it together. But I like to take this and twist it together. Twist these two wires together so it's coming out as one. And that's easy to do because this is stranded wire. Okay, now I've only got one wire. Now it's going to make it harder to come apart, right? Now I can screw that on there. Like I say, that's just something I do. You don't necessarily have to do that. Okay? There. You just kind of pull on that, make sure it's all nice and tight, and it is. Okay? Now, let's look at these black wires and figure this out. Okay, I'm looking at this. Remember, the other one that came out, it said too hot and too fan. And I'm looking at the back side here and I'm not seeing that at first glance. But that's because it's on the actual wire. So you got to look at that. Somewhere there it's going to be marked. Now this says ACN line. And this says to motor line. So I'm going to say to motor line would be the ceiling fan. And this says ACNL. So that means ACNL is the line. Okay, now if you have a question about that, you can look at your directions that come with your control. They always come with a direction. So just be careful with that and look at that and kind of peruse that and make sure that you're hooking this up properly. Let's look at this again now. To motor. And I know that's going to go up to the ceiling fan. Twist that wire together, the stranded wire, to make one little wire come out. I know this is the wire up here that's going up to the ceiling fan. I've already determined that from before. It looks like the copper portion that's stripped back is a little bit long for the little wire nut that was on there. Because what you want to do is once you put the wire nut on, you want to make sure that the copper is not extending out of the back side of the wire nut. And it looks like it's going to just barely. I don't want that, so I'm just going to cut the tip of this off. Okay. Let's find my wire again. I'm just going to hold that up there. Put your wire nut on. Pull on the stranded wire just a little bit. Make sure it's set in there tight, because sometimes, believe it or not, those can just pull right out. Now for added extra insurance, I'm going to put some electrical tape around there to keep that from ever coming loose. Now chances are nothing's ever going to happen. That's just something that I do. And like I say, you don't have to do that. But I've got a little tape here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. My little insurance policy that I happen to like to do. Okay. It's not a requirement. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Take the little tip off of that. And usually this wire, the stranded wire, is stripped back far enough. And if you got a question about that, you want to strip that back ever so slightly more, you can if you want. Okay, now this one here said AC. You can just double check things. Kind of look at this and make sure that you're hooking this up properly. Last thing you want to do is hook it up improperly. And this ground copper line, this is solid copper line there. It's short enough, and so I don't have to cut that one off like the other one. Okay. That on there, pull on that, everything looks good. I'm going to put electrical tape on that one too. Okay, so far so good. Now before we push this in, what we could do, if you want, you don't have to, but if you're unsure of yourself, what you could do is turn the breaker back on. We can turn the breaker back on right now. We can control this right now by turning it on and seeing if it works before you get everything pushed back in there and find out, oh brother, it's not working. But you know, that's just something if you wanted to do that. I'm not going to do that because I feel confident that everything is going to work just fine. Okay? Now we've got to shove the wires back in the box. Now you might be wondering, hey Joe, how come you didn't put electrical tape on the ground wires? Well, if you remember, you saw how I put those on. I twisted both ground wires together before I put the wire nut on. The wire nut's on there nice and tight, and I shouldn't have to put any electrical tape on there. I basically do that on these others because you've got one stranded wire, and stranded means all kinds of small, very small little wires all together, and then that generally comes from a light switch that's already has these wires on it or something like that for dimmer switches or ceiling fan switches, that sort of thing. Okay, but the solid copper wire, you know, you might have a tendency of something sliding there if you don't have the wire nut on properly. Sometimes you can put a wire nut on and think that it's tight. You can't get it on any tighter, and all of a sudden you just pull and son of a gun, the wire comes out. Because it's just how it was hooked up, and it just didn't grab it the proper way. So you just have to be careful about that, because the last thing you want is to push everything back into the wall and then find out later you've got a short problem. It works intermittently or something like that. It might be because the wire nut came off, or one of the wires came out of the backside of your wire nut. Okay, so be careful with that. Okay, just to appease you, I put electrical tape on this ground wire just for ducks. Okay? You put the electrical tape on, if you're going to do it, obviously you got to put it halfway on your wire nut, a couple wraps, then bring it on down to the wires, hold the wires together tight, and then wrap that. That's how you're going to do it properly. Okay? Let's just get you in a little bit closer. I mean, there's only so close I can get this without me being in the way. You know what I mean? Alright, so I'm going to look at this first and decide which way is up and down. You'll be able to see that with the writing or numbers or whatever. because the thing I don't want to do is start pushing in all these wires and have this flipped around the wrong way, because maybe in order to flip it around, maybe I have to redo the wires a little bit, you know. Chances are I shouldn't have to either way, because these should be flexible enough to turn this way or that way, which should be okay, but you just kind of want to be careful as you're pushing these wires back in. Alright, one wire at a time. Let's get the ground wire in first, because I want to get that one in and out of the way. I can just push that back in behind this other existing light switch, because you see how fat this box is? This ceiling fan switch, I've got to make sure there's enough room so I can push that all the way back in there. And there was from before. I just have to kind of strategically figure out how I'm going to locate these wires. Okay, one of these wires at a time. Just fold it over and kind of bend it up in there. And like I say, you may have to relocate the wire, because see, you've got that wire nut head on here. But you've got to get that down in there in a right spot, so that it doesn't interfere with you being able to push this box in all the way. Okay, because these are nice, easy, flexible lines right there. Okay, so now we can just gently test this to see if we got to do anything else. Now see, I'm pushing on that and it feels pretty hard at the bottom. That's because the wire nut is right there. So maybe I can relocate that a little bit over off to the left, you know, and push that wire down in there. Okay, I think that's going to do it. There. I still have to push on it kind of hard. And it's because this one wire is in here. And I may have to just pull that out and rearrange that. I see where the wire is. And if I swing it out of the way, now push it back up. That should be better. I think that's going to be out of the way now. Because the last thing you want is for this to go in so tight and thinking, oh, I'll just take the screws and ram it in that way. Well, these screws only go into a plastic box. Most of the time, your existing box in the wall is going to be plastic. It's got threads in there, very small threads on your metal screw. And if you think you're going to pull that in there, you're just going to strip it out of the box 9 out of 10 times. That's why you want to check this and make sure you can push it in without having too much pressure on it. Okay? Now push that up in there. And I could use the old screws that came out of here, but the heads are kind of stripped. And so I'm using the new screws, and these new screws came with a washer because of that backing plate on there, because the head is smaller. So just depending what kind you get, just be aware of that. Never really had to put one in with a washer before, but it's warranted on this particular model switch for the ceiling fan. Okay, so once I put one in about halfway, I'll push the other one in, and I'll keep pushing on that, make sure you have the wires and the wire nut back in the right place, and I do now. See, if I didn't do all that checking first, this wouldn't fit in there nice and tight, and that's what I want, to fit nice and snug as a bug in a rug. Now go ahead, and I'm gonna get that kind of tight, and then I'm gonna check it. I'm not gonna tighten that up all the way until I put this in and check that out and see where it's gonna go, you know? I've got this, I don't have it tight all the way. It can still move around, but I want to kind of keep it there until I check that out. I can see the whole thing's got to go that way. Okay, so I can pull it over. Guess it's not going to hold until I get this a little bit tighter. I don't want to overdo it because see, now I can take the side of the box and kind of move it with my screwdriver. You know what I mean? If I have to, like that. I don't want to do it too tight just yet. I want to check it again. Man. Like that. Okay, there we go. Alright, that looks pretty good. If anything, it could go back to the right just a hair. Okay, just a little bit. This screw I've got to loosen up a little bit. Look at it again. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, now I can cinch this down. You know, just a little bit tighter, like that. So far, so good. And before I call that good right there, I'm just going to wipe down this wall a little bit from where this switch was kind of hanging back and forth. I saw just a few little marks there. So take a little cleaner and a little rag or something. Get that off if you can. Main thing we want to do is when we get done with this, we don't want anybody to think we've ever done anything at this location at all. So clean up after yourself. Before you check your switch, your ceiling fan switch, you find out it's not working, don't forget you got to turn your breaker back on. Now, let's check it out. The moment of truth. I have not turned this on yet, so this is going to be the first time turning it on. I always kind of hold my breath a little bit doing electrical stuff, and I know I've hooked everything up right, but it's always kind of magical. And like, I hope it works, you know, when I get done with something. So here we go. Oh, nothing is happening. I'm looking at the ceiling fan and nothing is happening. And do you remember why? Because we have it in the off position. Remember this fan right here? We have it in the off position. So what I have to do, and I can do it two ways, but I'm going to do it so that you can see what I'm doing, okay? I'm going to turn it on right here. And this is how I want it controlled, right here, okay? So now, what I have to do is I've got to pull this one time. And when I pull it once, it's going to be in the high position. Once I pull this, it should be on. Then once it's on, I don't have to do anything at this pull chain anymore. There it is. And it's on high. Now see, I don't have to pull this with this chain anymore. I just want to leave that chain alone. Right? Oh, that feels good. Now I can control it over here. I have it in the high position. If I turn it off, it should go off, and it goes off. Turn it on number 1, and that's high. Number 2 is medium, and 3 is low. And it's going slow now, and it's all controlled. See how slow it's going right now? And I didn't even have to do anything at that chain right there. See, when you hook this back up, you only want to pull that chain once. You only want to pull this chain once, because if you pull it again, it's in the second position, the medium position, and the third time it's in the low position. And if you do that, then you can't control it over here at the switch, okay? So I hope you just learned something with that. That's how you can adjust your ceiling fan if it's not coinciding with your switch. You want to check that out, because if it's not, let's say I got it in the high position right now, and let's say that's it, and this ceiling fan is only going in the slow position. If I put it in medium and low, it'll go actually even slower probably, because it's not designed for that, because it's already in the slow speed. You see what I mean? So when I have it on the high position, and if my ceiling fan is not going high, somebody's going to want to turn that air conditioner on over there and cost me some money, right? So you go over here to your chain, and you can adjust it right here. I know this is in low position, so if I pull it once, it's going to go off. Okay, now it's off. Okay, now I'm going to pull this once, and it's going to be in a high position. And that's where I've got it positioned on my ceiling fan wall switch, right there. Okay, this is where you're going to control it from now on. High, medium, low, and off. Right there. Don't even worry about that chain anymore. You don't need to use that anymore. Okay? That's it. Now you know how to replace this ceiling fan switch. Go out there and do yours, because I know you can do it now. If I can do it, you can do it. That's all I got for now, but I'll be back with more videos.